Your wish. Your wish. She was live, but she was talking there. Next thing, me. Yeah, I think it's sharp now because I took out the stick. They must coordinate with me and say we're going live. Yeah, now she starts talking there. But this woman, bruh.
these pandemic times. Ladies and gentlemen, there's been no better time for us to actually talk about these topics, actually engage on these topics that actually matter to us as the aviation sector. Um, the year 2020 has taught us one fact of life, and that fact is that change is definitely inevitable. Ladies and gentlemen, we have seen the aviation sector in the year 2020 crumbling to its knees. However, we as the aviation industry, we've also seen that we are a resilient people. We are the resilient nation. We are able to forge through in the tough times that we've experienced. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guest speakers, we'll look at topics that actually matter to us, that actually talks to how we aim to engineer the aviation DNA in these pandemic times. We will look at topics, we will ask ourselves questions like, um, for instance, when we're looking at the fourth industrial revolution, the technologies that are put up there, the processes that are out there, our people skill sets, developments, we will engage and ask ourselves, are these technologies sufficient for us? Will they be able to sustain us? Are we going to be able to look back in the future and say, yes, the pandemic was there, but however, we were able to forge through in this pandemic because we are definitely a resilient industry. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guest speakers, I would also like to emphasize the fact that in the aviation industry, in the transport industry as a whole, we as the aviation sector, uh, we are the pioneers, we are the leaders in the industry. So the other transport industries, the other transport entities, they look up to us to come up with these strategies, to come up with these collaborations, to come up with initiatives that actually will make us forge through in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guest speakers, the theme of this year once again is we are re-engineering aviation DNA in these pandemic times. We'll touch on topics such as cybersecurity. We'll touch on topics that talks to data management. We'll talk on topics that talks to innovation. We'll talk in mentioning for the first topic, like the cybersecurity. There's a report that Kenzo distributed a year ago, which talks about that there is about 1,000 cyber attacks that we as the aviation industry have experienced in the past 5 years. Looking at that, you just imagine these cyber attacks. There were some of them in your airlines, like for instance Air India, where they experienced cyber attacks and online tickets were sold. So imagine if we're having such within our business, that talks to the economic risks that we have as the business. So we as the aviation sector have to come up with ideas on how are we going to mitigate such risks. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guest speakers, we will touch base on topics like data management. We'll look at how we, the aviation sector, are aiming to come up with a non-solo approach of looking at things. So how we usually do things now is in terms of each entity. For instance, you'll have your NSPs having their own data systems, having your airlines having their own data systems. So having your regulators, your CAAs having their own regulatory systems. However, when we're looking at the future, we want to come up with a dynamic approach of doing things instead of a static approach of doing things. We're planning to go into the aeronautical information management type of approach where we don't have a solo type of looking at data management structures, but however, we look at it collaboratively. We have data lakes where each entity come together and we collaborate, and we have a central data management system within the aviation ecosystems. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guest speakers, we have topics that we'll be talking about, talking to innovation, stimulating innovation. I've read in one of the previous articles that I've read before, which talks so that we as South Africa, we used to actually build infrastructure. We used to build infrastructure within South Africa. But however, myself being the surveillance engineer, I understand that now we actually are buying infrastructure from OEMs overseas, but that skill can be brought back to us. We can actually use the skill sets in within South Africa, in within our people, and build our people, innovate our people, to stimulate that innovation criteria in within our people, so that we are able to forge through in this pandemic time. So it's actually a summit, ladies and gentlemen, whereby we need to engage. I just want to mention one thing, ladies and gentlemen, that it's a summit, it's an engagement, meaning that speakers will be able to be given a platform to speak, but however, we in the panel will speak, and the general delegates will be able to ask questions and answers. But I just want to encourage the spirit of freedom within us, so that everybody can engage and everybody is free to actually engage in this summit. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, honorable guest speakers, without wasting any further time, I also believe that you have downloaded the permit. You've downloaded the program in the website, and we will then call upon our speakers, and once they've spoken, then we'll be given a chance to engage. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guest speakers, before a waste of time, I would like to welcome on the floor our honorable CEO, our leadership in ATNS, Mr. Dumisani Sangweni. So I will just briefly welcome him to the stage. Mr. Sangweni is our very own leadership and ATNS CEO. Mr. Sangweni has served in the transport industry for more than 15 years as a managing director in Avi, Tanzania. Mr. Sangweni has worked at executive roles at SAA and the broader general transport. Mr. Sangweni holds a BSc in aviation technology from the USA Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Mr. Sangweni also holds a postgraduate diploma in transport economics. Mr. Sangweni also holds a postgraduate diploma in business administration. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guest speakers, I am honored to welcome my very own leadership to the stage, Mr. Dumisani Sangweni. Over to you, my leader. Take the floor. Thank you. Mr. Sangweni, you are muted, my leader. We can't hear you. Leadership, you are muted. We can't hear you.
Thank you, Chairperson of ATNS board and board members, CEOs, directors, generals, heads of department, regional directors and executives present, our distinguished speakers and participants for the event, members of the media, delegates of the summit and colleagues, and everyone present. I thank you for the welcome, Master of Ceremonies and your counterparts. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You will agree with me that the past 16 months or more have been an uphill and difficult battle. A battle of epic proportions, to be more specific. One can say a fierce battle for survival in many respects. For survival to breathe, to walk, to work, literally. Not only for companies, organizations, or state departments we work for, but in our own personal spaces, which have been affected significantly by this rampant, heartless, and persistent COVID-19 pandemic. It is a fact that the pandemic has brought untold devastation and despondency to all and sundry. Powerful economies have been brought to their knees. Companies liquidated, and humanity has suffered. Millions of lives, not to mention jobs, have been lost. We can go on and on, colleagues. The list of challenges arising from this pandemic is endless. Only now, as we catch our breaths over the last few weeks after the last wave, And by that I mean in the past few weeks, life has come. We have come to know life as we have come to know is showing some signs of normalcy. Experts in medicine, science, and economics and other critical fields do, however, predict a very long road ahead. Some encouraging positives, though, are showing after a devastating blow to the aviation industry and linked tourism and travel sectors, which we all know have impacted greatly. South Africa has recently been removed from the UK's red list, a welcome development. Intercontinental travel is now permitted, and that is for those who are vaccinated. This means international borders are now open for global trade and travel. In the SA domestic market, we are hoping to see a resurgence of travel as we move towards the festive season. Tourism is expected to begin its journey to recovery and to once more flourish. This is, of course, if we do not encounter another wave of this deadly pandemic. And such is the unpredictability of our environment, which has hampered our ability to forecast, to plan, and to respond appropriately to the markets. Our airspace as ATNS and ANSP over this period of the pandemic has been amazingly quiet, as one would expect. And our air traffic controllers, ATCs, await in anticipation for the days of busy, congested airspace to demonstrate their skills again and to get that much needed exposure that makes them what they are. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupts everyday life for millions, if not billions, of economically active persons around the globe. Conferences such as this one have moved online, as we are seeing now. need in South Africa for the development of a knowledge-based economy. Economics of this nature have demonstrated a higher GDP per capita. Close quote. How true these words were. And who can forget Siyabulela Puza, well-known Tata-born innovator, recipient of 2 grand awards and the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair, and an African Leadership Network Fellow, who was a keynote speaker in the 2014 summit. He captivated us in his very energetic and inspiring presentation where he said, and I quote, "I was chasing the roar of a Cessna plane dropping election pamphlets over Mthatha. It was 1994, the first year of a new democracy, and the sight of that technological marvel ignited me into a curiosity for science and a passion for using technology to engineer an African renaissance," close quotes. Again, how profound. Professor Benny Anderson, then CEO of the Da Vinci Institute in Midrand, Johannesburg, was our guest speaker in 2015. He caught everyone's attention when he mentioned that innovative, open quote, innovative ideas are usually dismissed as ridiculous, dangerous, or obvious. In fact, one needs the ability to jettison what is known and already in practice in order to truly innovate and come with something new, close quote. Professor Anderson was responding to the summit's theme, innovation, the key to aviation sustainability in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, regional integration is an extremely important concept we have been struggling with for a very long time. Globally, and of course on the continent, we have 8 regional economic communities who are often at odds with each other. We have a mix of membership that can create loopholes where members fall through. Close quote. That was Dr. Michelle Reuters, then attached to the Development Bank of South Africa, noting that East Africa has done very well in terms of regional integration. But she cautioned, open quote, "At the back of this, we have an intra-African trade at less than 17%, close quote." Again, these words force us to reflect. We must reflect as to what the implementation of initiatives such as Saturn, Yamoussoukro, Accord, and how we have fared in implementing this, and what this has brought to the aviation industry. Had these initiatives been aggressively implemented, would we be able to unlock in this challenging period of reduced air traffic movements and passenger travel, passenger figures, would we have been able to unlock a better response to the COVID pandemic? It is the onus of regulatory entities, traffic governments all over the continent to resolve and recommit to the implementation of these accords. In 2016, the summit's theme was aviation innovation for regional integration in Africa, contributing towards economic infrastructure development and social cohesion. Barry Kashambo, Regional Director, ICAO, Eastern and Southern Africa, ISAF, speaking to the summit 2017 theme, said, open quote, "In Africa, for Africa, enhancing aviation sustainability of the African market within the global space," said, "Many African countries could be sharing infrastructure and capabilities and services. We must harness the equipment to be able to achieve the seamless management of upper airspace. And ICAO is at the center of this shift. Harnessing synergies is key," close quote. How true this rings today as we are faced by constraints as ANSPs in funding for CapEx investments to lift the technological base of our CNS infrastructure, which is constantly evolving, and to attract huge CapEx OPEX budgets, to keep this infrastructure operational and safe. Integration of networks across FIRs in a collaborative manner to create seamless managed airspaces across the continent is now an imperative, ladies and gentlemen. We must all work towards with the speed of light to achieve. A recent summit at the recent ICAO APEC discussed this very important subject of sharing and rationalization of CNS ATM infrastructure and resources. And the discussion was led by heads of ANSPs, including us as ATNS, from across the continent, and regional and global airline managers. These initiatives must continue until we find a lasting solution to rationalization, harmonization, collaboration, and the joint use of infrastructure. Lastly, delegates, in 2019 or 18, Dr. George Simata, Secretary of the Cabinet Office of the Prime Minister in Namibia, stated, open quote, "Safety officers are highly competent people. Investing in them with the right training from a talent management perspective makes them worthwhile participants in our organizations. Perception of self-worth is also a critical element in retaining their services." Close quote. This highly successful and well-attended summit theme was premised on breaking barriers in the aviation industry through innovation. And Dr. Samata's assertion was based on what he called 4 streams of thought in talent management school, that applying and securing talent for aviation safety is critical. These were recruitment, creating a pipeline. The 4 streams were recruitment, creating a pipeline of sustainability, developing inherent talent, and lastly, examining strategic roles in aviation safety. In this difficult period, as we grapple with upskilling, training, retaining, and attracting talent in specialist and operational areas as ANSPs, how true and prophetic these wise reflections were by Dr. Simata. Before I joined this platform with you today, we were in a meeting with the called by the Chief Operating Officer to discuss the poaching threat we face right now from the Middle East on our ATCs, air traffic controllers, that has just emerged, joined by the Executive Human Capital and Chief of Air Traffic Services. And our only surmise to this problem is that we need to respond, and we need to respond proactively and face the new realities of the environment today, which are forcing us to reset planning for human capital plans in a progressive and innovative manner to mitigate exposure to the entity of a key resource, human capital. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to offer my heartfelt, deepest, and sincere thanks to these and other experts joining us today, and those not mentioned herein, who over the years selflessly and diligently offered their time to be with us in this journey and the last chapter of the Avi Afrique experience. And we now turn to a new chapter. As it has been stated in the communication you received when dates were confirmed, the ATNS Avi Afrique Summit 2021 theme this year is Flight Plan to the Future, re-engineering the DNA in these pandemic times. I have been advised that this was particularly informed by the changing nature of our global and local operating landscape, and more recently, the disruptive influence of the COVID-19 pandemic in the global business space, including aviation, amongst others that have been affected. Without doubt, these 2 elements have the potential to affect the long-term sustainable growth of the aviation industry. And we must discuss them robustly, progressively, and come up with resolutions and solutions. How apt and relevant Avi Afrique Innovation Summit is today. And we hope that in this new chapter, we will gain traction to begin to overcome some of these challenges that have confronted us in the past 2 years or so. I therefore hereby welcome you all to this year's summit sessions. As has been explained by the MC, it is a Master of Ceremonies, it is a very impressive lineup of topics which shall be debated and discussed in the next 2 days. And hopefully we can conclude with a way forward that will bring us to a better space than we are in today. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hereby declare the 2021 ATNS Avi Afrique Innovation Summit open. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sangweni. Those kind words are most welcome. It is indeed the time for Africa to collaborate. The grips of the pandemic have really crippled us as a continent. The only way we can actually rise above everything is if we teamed up together and joined the world in the growth that the global space and the opportunities will be able to gain us some sustainable future in ATNS. My name is Khomotso Molefi. I'll be assisting in co-hosting everyone here at the Avi Afrique Global Summit. Just a small bio. I'm responsible for planning, organizing, and coordinating air traffic services within the OR Tambo International Approach area of responsibility. This in order to satisfy the reasonable requirements of the aviation community, internal and external stakeholders alike. In this role, I define operational requirements, processes, and procedures for provision of a safe and efficient approach control service at OR Tambo in the short and medium term, in order to maintain and enhance the comprehensive air traffic service as mandated by ATNS. Safety management is paramount in the fulfillment of my daily responsibility, together with a team of highly skilled approach controllers. In my current role, I've been active since September 2016. Before that, in 2004, I began my career journey in aviation as a trainee military air traffic controller in the South African Air Force at the following Air Force bases: Air Force Base Hoedspruit, Air Force Base Waterkloof, Air Force Base Eysterplaat, Air Force Base Makado. My career at ATNS started in 2009 at Lanseria International Airport, where I served as a procedural approach controller until the developmental path led me to further contribution as a radar approach controller at OR Tambo in 2012. With experience totaling 17 years in air traffic control service provision space, I remain dedicated to the profession by way of ensuring the development of younger professional air traffic controllers in my capacity. I hail from the township of Sebokeng in the Vaal, and I'm proud to say so, where I was born 36 years ago. Now, let's go through a few housekeeping rules as we carry on with the Avi Afrique Global Summit. If I could remind all of our special guests to put comments in the message box, we will then go on to post those comments as questions to relevant speakers. We encourage you to comment and share your thoughts on the ATNS Twitter and Facebook platform using the hashtag AviAfrique2021 throughout the day today and tomorrow. There is a live YouTube link available on the ATNS YouTube page, accessible to all. It is a great privilege to welcome onto the platform an industry leader, global aviation contributor in the cybersecurity space, Mr. Patrick Mana from Eurocontrol, who will take the day off with an exciting topic in his innovative area of expertise. Patrick Mana is the Eurocontrol Cybersecurity Program Manager and European Air Traffic Management Computer Emergency Response Team Manager. He has spent his entire career working in air traffic management. He started 34 years ago, working with Thales on aviation software development and product management. In 1999, he joined Eurocontrol, where he led the safety assessment activities. In 2008, he moved on to the Single European Sky Air Traffic Management Research Joint Undertaking, where he was the head of development framework for all transverse activities, including security, for 6 years. Eurocontrol is a pan-European civil military organization dedicated to supporting European aviation. It is an intergovernmental organization composed of 41 member states plus 2. I must make mention of the fact that I have sent a LinkedIn professional social media request to Mr. Mana. He's yet to accept. This presentation will then be followed by 2 other topics presented by Mr. Sivise Nzenze and Mr. Biko Managa. These presentations will then be succeeded by a combined panel discussion. Welcome, Mr. Mana. We are so honored and privileged to have you on our platform. The floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I cannot share. I have not the right to share my presentation. So can you please give me the presentation rights? So I will, while the presentation rights are given to me, I will start to explain a little bit the topic of cybersecurity. If you hear some background noise, please, my apologies. We are going through a huge storm over Brussels today, and it's raining not only cats and dogs, it's more than that. So apologies for that. So I can't share the slides. So either you give me the rights or you use my file and I'll tell you next as you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Mana. The rights you shortly.
Okay, thank you. So the objective of my talk today will be to raise awareness about cybersecurity, to help you to understand what are the challenges we are facing, but also I think an important message I will convey, and I will give you a concrete example, is that cybersecurity is not the duty of one team, the IT security team. That's the duty of everybody in an organization. We are all the guardians of our entry point, which is our own, for example, account to enter the organization. And that's in line with the message of your CEO, which was saying that, it's nice to have some systems coming from overseas, but also we have all in our own organization to build competence so that we can all together support our organization. And in cyber, this is a super important message, which is we are all having a role. Why? Because aviation is complex. As you can see, we have a lot of interfaces. Some are quite old. They were designed at the time when there was no security at all. So a lot of, protocol standards used in aviation have no security requirements. For example, I was safety manager of the CPDLC, Controller Pilot Data Communication System, for Europe and contributing to international standards. There were, at that time, no security requirements. So that's one of the challenges we face, is that it's good from a safety point of view. You have redundancy, you have dissimilarity, but from a security point of view, it's making the task more difficult to protect all the potential entry points. And when I say aviation, you need to think about large, not only NSPs, airport, airlines, it's also all these supply chain, but also it can be all the assets that we have that provide our service, like building management system, like power supply, like the heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So this is really important to understand that our ecosystem is really large and difficult to protect. And when I say that aviation is made of a lot of systems, well, it's a mix of legacy system. And system for me means people, procedure, equipment, people, process, technology. So cybersecurity won't be addressed only by few, firewalls, antivirus, or few technology that will be necessary but not sufficient. So we have this mix of systems which were designed a while ago with no security and the new one with security. But think about it, over time it will always be the case. In 30 years from now, we will have systems with the security of the future, but also the security of systems which will have 10, 20 years old. So that's an important aspect. And again, as I say, system, it's also the people. So a mix of young guys and older guys who have different way of reacting to using technology, to being exposed to the new threat that cyber is introducing. And of course, well, we know that in aviation, safety is first, and sometimes safety and security don't go together. For example, I want a password from a security point of view to protect the access to a system, though from a safety point of view, the ATSEP want to directly have access to the system without being bothered by a password. So just to give you an idea about the fact that our systems are under stress, quite often, we have this wrong idea that, well, we are not on internet, therefore we are protected. No, first, this is not true. Second, today all the systems are under stress. This is a picture of a capture of all the illegitimate attempts to enter our air traffic control system in Maastricht. So Eurocontrol is in charge of the upper airspace of Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Germany, Western Germany. So we have an air traffic control center, and as you can see, as we speak, endlessly, there are attempts to enter our system. I don't believe where this is coming from. It's where this is becoming visible. So that's where the attackers have decided to make their attack or their illegitimate attempt to enter the system visible. Very different from where it is actually coming from. So you see our systems are under stress. We may not realize it, but as we speak, our systems are under threat. This is the new world we are in. If we speak about digitalization, this is what it means. It means cyber threats. So our duty is to make the cyber threats which are increasing, leading to a level of risk which remain acceptable. So quite often, we have this idea that aviation is not subject to cyber attack. This is wrong. These are examples of companies that were victims of cyber attacks. Here it's more manufacturers, and you can see big names. So it's not only small companies. It can be to steal some information, to get some ransomware, some money, means to monetize most of the time, but also, an important know-how of these companies, which is stolen for the benefit of others. It's not only manufacturers, it's also operators, being airport operators, being airlines, being supply chain, like CETA. It can be for money, for ransomware. It can be because they want to mine some cryptocurrency using your CPU and your electricity. It can be because some guys want to steal some data and make some money out of it. And sometimes they use insiders. So this is an example there of an insider who was used for that. And of course, and if you don't behave properly, you may be subject.
One of the things that I would like to raise, for instance, in terms of this enterprise data warehouse or the data lake, is that one of the key takeaways is that when you do these things, you must actually build the algorithm proximity and interpolate all the alerts that are necessary for the organization. And also what is very important is to ensure that we analyze air traffic operations using the real-time data so that we do not delay the decision that have to be made by those that are responsible for decision making. And also, we must also learn that underpinned by this element is that you've got the advanced digital technologies and intelligence systems that you must ensure that they work back and forth with the data and we're able to feed them with the data and be able to ensure that, for instance, you give them the cognitive ability so that they can be able to decide right on the spot. And also what is important is that the interconnection of all the sources and the information is necessary to ensure an optimized customer satisfaction and operational efficiency. And this actually, at the end of the day, helps, for instance, to ensure that the ANSPs, they be able to differentiate themselves strategically and ensure that they continue to contribute to the economy and play their diverse role in the economy. And then also, what is important is that we must understand that this ecosystem is not the whole aviation industry, but it forms the bigger part of the aviation ecosystem management processes. So the question is that how do we then use it to ensure that it enhances the way things are done in the organization? And lastly, we must look at this data lake or the data warehouse as a bank that where everyone can go and actually withdraw and be able to make the decision and get the information packaged in a manner that helps everyone to be able to make the decisions and be able to ensure that they contribute to an entire aviation ecosystem and also in the organizational growth, so that they can be able to ensure that there is the safety and the security of the air traffic industry in general. From there, colleagues, I think that is my story. I would like to thank for the opportunity and I'll wait for the comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sivuyisa, for a well-presented presentation. Very exciting indeed. I think I'm not the only one who's excited about the topics and how it was presented. And also I really like the fact that you came up with solutions, you came up with strategies. I'm an engineer, I'm an electronic engineer. However, from the presentation, I really feel that I can also be a computer scientist myself. No, thank you, Mr. Sivuyisa. That was a very good presentation. I just took maybe from the presentation. I like what you talked about when you were talking about how we need to improve our services. So, in terms of us collaborating and having this data lake, right, as ANSPs, as the regulator, the aviation ecosystem as a whole, I like how you fuse us together, you unite us, you take so like I really like the fact that you're talking about the unified approach of doing things instead of how we used to solely think that we as ATNS, we have our own data systems, we have our own processes, we have our own way of looking at data management. However, when we're looking at the bigger approach, we're looking at moving to SWIM. You touched based on SWIM, where now we're looking at the general aviation ecosystem coming together, building this data lake, so that it's for the benefits of the unified ecosystem, not only for the benefits of us as the ANSP alone. I really liked how you touched based on that. I also liked the fact that you touched to a topic that actually interested me as well, because when you talked about how we need to actually analyze data trends, and so that we can focus on the future and then have a consolidated trend that we have been working on. So yeah, very interesting topic indeed, Mr. Sivuyisa. I will then read questions that are on the chat box. There's actually 2 questions, but the other question I believe talks to Mr. Mana that has left. But the question I'll start with, I do believe this one is addressed to you. It says, has an analysis been conducted to understand the accuracy of the detection mechanisms that are currently being used? Mr. Sivuyisa, did you get the question, or should I repeat the question?
Can you please repeat that again?
All right. Okay. The question says, has an analysis been conducted to understand the accuracy of the detection mechanisms that are currently being used?
Well, for me, that the detection mechanism will actually be dependent on what you would actually look at when you look at the quality of the data. For instance, one of the things that ATNS did before my arrival, which is something that continued until I was here, was to look, for instance, on how do you then use the incidents or the data that is being fed into the system to ensure that that the models that you've actually developed, they are able to pick up the anomalies. This, for instance, was only speaking to how to use the COVID data to ensure that the billing is accurate, and you can be able to predict that ATNS, for instance, in the next 6 months or so will be still financially liquid. And that, to me, it's something that will rely, for instance, on whether you continue to feed the systems the proper the data. And secondly, it's the quality of the data that you feed into the system, which actually goes back to those that actually deal with the transactions or the operational matters from day to day, to say, how do they then ensure that what they feed into the systems is the proper and the data that has got the integrity. A typical of the GIGO, that garbage in, garbage out, and to ensure that you're able to test the validity of the models. Thank you. I hope that answers the question.
No, thank you, Mr. Sivuyisa. Well answered, sir. I have a question of my own as well before I move to the next question, which is addressed to Mr. Mana. Before I let you go, I have a question which is just, it's simple, something you touched based on, which has sparked my interest that I will also like to engage, maybe get a better clarity on. You talked about in data management that we also need to look at governance. We need to look at the rules. We need to look at how we manage and the governance part of it. So maybe just for my own, it just sparked my interest, Mr. Sivuyisa. Apologies there. I'll be asking a lot of questions, but I do trust you'll be able to answer me, sir. But it just sparked my interest on how do we plan? How do we plan to actually incorporate the governance portion of things into data management? I hope my question is not ambiguous, sir.
Thank you on that. This is actually something that we have actually been engaging with the colleagues at ATNS. One, we're addressing this from the governance perspective itself, which is what sort of policies that you put in place to ensure that you're able to classify, for instance, the data, that what is top secret, what is public, and all that, what goes internal and external. And the second element is around the technologies, which as part of the design of the EDW or the data lake at ATNS, we're engaging very strongly with the IT security to say what sort of mechanisms that you have in place that can help us to ensure that we implement these controls that we've actually defined on the policy. And for instance, you'll look at things, for instance, like your secure FTPs and that, your multi-factor authentication and all those kind of things. And things, for instance, like your log files, where you can be able to access that, you can be able to see who accessed what system at what particular time, so that you can be able to track and trace if what has happened at that particular time and see what its incidents have happened then. And the last element, which I think is very critical, is the human element, where, for instance, you train the people, or you do about the awareness, things like, for instance, that we do at ATNS, like your brown bag sessions, where you actually go through with the people on what is the importance of ensuring that you give the access to the people, the appropriate access to the data. And secondly, is, for instance, how do you train them to be able to see what is abnormal and what is normal? So there is those three elements to me, which is government, policy, technology, and the people.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sivuyisa. You answered me well. I don't have any further follow-ups. It's well answered, Mr. Sivuyisa. I really like the fact that you touch base on people, and then when you're talking about people, you can see that you are a people's person. You like to see people being developed, and also touch based on the technologies. When you're talking about the entire governance as a whole, you look at the people, you look at the technologies, and you touched based on the processes. So basically on my side, the question that talked about governance in the data management topic, you've answered me well. I don't have any further follow-ups. Then we'll move on to the next question. But maybe before I move on to the next question, which is addressed to Mr. Mana from Eurocontrol on cyber security. Yeah, great presentation there, Mr. Mana. Great presentation as well. Exciting. You touched base on digitization, which talks to the fact that as we are moving towards a digital platform, we are more prone to cyber attacks. You also touched based on phishing. We've experienced some phishing also ourselves, so we are aware of these topics that you were talking about. We are aware of what you are talking about, and actually when you're talking about these topics, you're talking about something that we are aware of. And I'm also happy the fact that you talked on solutions. You gave us solutions on how do we then mitigate these risks that we have. I was also very intrigued by your presentation, Mr. Mana. There's one thing that you also touched based on, which also really excited me, the fact that we need to learn from each other. So as the aviation ecosystem, we can't say, no, ATNS is experiencing this, CAA is experiencing this, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't work like that now, because we are more moving towards a unified type of setup, a unified type of ecosystem whereby all the aviation industry role players come together and have that one goal to say, no, cybersecurity is a threat. We are all aware of it, but how do we then come up with strategies? How do we then come up with processes? How do we then come up with people's skills development to actually fight these threats? I was very intrigued by your presentation, Mr. Mana. There's a question that was on the chat box. This one I do believe is posed to you. It says, it's from Anonymous. It says, hi, I do apologize if I was covered. It was covered in the presentation. I lost connection for a bit, but I was wondering if there has been an increase of cyber attacks in aviation since the pandemic started. What with people working from home, etc., etc. But I believe that Anonymous just wants to say, with the pandemic, after 2020, right, have we had an increase in cyber security attacks? I hope, Anonymous, I've summarized your question very well. You are anonymous, so I can't really see who you are. But I believe, Mr. Mana, you got the question. Over to you, myself.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, when we answer this question, we have always to be careful, because we are speaking about what is reported. And there is always a difference between what is actually happening versus what is reported. Clearly, during the first 6 months of the COVID crisis, there was a huge increase in phishing emails, and not only specific to aviation. Why? Think about it. Everybody is interested in COVID. So we have a good chance that somehow someone will click on whatever link or attachment because providing information about COVID. So clearly we saw really a significant increase. There were also some waves of fraudulent websites impersonating airlines, especially just before the summer last year, at the time where we were all, I would say, proposed to go on leave, and then suddenly, because of the second wave, having to reschedule flights, rebook the flight. So that's something that we've noticed. Now, it's always difficult to say whether there was an actual increase in other kind of cyber attacks, because I would say the level of reporting today and sharing is not, I would say, good enough so that we can really compare one year to another. But the remote teleworking clearly was an issue. We have been, for example, at Eurocontrol, victim of an attack this way by some guys teleworking, clearly. So yes, this is something that we have to consider, that it's an opportunity for the bad guys. And we have some type of incident for which, yes, there was an increase.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mana. Thank you for your answer. I believe Anonymous was well answered there. Yeah, what you're talking about is very true. Hey, from 2020, when we started working from home, we haven't experienced this a lot, such cyber attacks and emails and phishing emails as much as we have from 2020. So what you were talking about when you touched based on the fact that digitization actually exposes us to cyber attacks more, it's actually true. But also there's a report that I read from Kenzo, which says 5 years ago we have experienced over 1,000 cyber attacks. So basically, it is an issue. But I believe Anonymous was asking that has it increased from what has been reported on? And yeah, well answered, Mr. Mana. And also, I like the fact that you don't just talk about the risks alone, but on your presentation, you also touch based on the solutions on how do we then mitigate such attacks so that when we are going forward, because basically the future is digitization. Basically, the future is this is how we're going to be working in the future. And who would have known basically that this is how we'll be working? Because our way of working in the past, we were office bound, but however now moving into this new platform of working, which exposes us to these attacks, we have to have thoughts and strategies on how we mitigate these strategies. It's a very, very interesting topic indeed, Mr. Mana. All right. On my side, then there's no further questions on the chat box. I will then call on the stage my colleague, Homoto, to introduce our next speaker. Homoto, over to you, my leader.
Thank you, Nubanda. Let me remind our guests and request that you interact with us on social media platforms that are available. It's at ATNS on Twitter. It's at ATNS on Facebook. It's also at ATNS on LinkedIn. The Facebook page for ATNS has the live stream for this event. Also has a chat box where you can leave comments for us. Thank you. Before I introduce the next speaker, I have to make mention of the fact that my first Avi Afrique that I attended in 2017 was at the CIR itself. The passages of innovation, the interesting people you meet, and I'm not quite surprised that our next guest or our next speaker is an innovator himself. It gives me such great privilege to welcome onto the platform an innovator in the South African engineering space, Mr. Biko Managa. Biko has extensive experience within the aerospace, defense, and security sector, having worked at Denel for over 15 years. Biko has held several senior management positions at Denel, such as Chief Program Manager, Chief Technology Officer, and Operations Manager. Prior to joining the CSIR, Biko held the position of Executive Manager Engineering, Technology and Innovation at Denel Dynamics. Biko holds a Master's in Science in Electrical Engineering, MTech in Electrical Engineering, and a Master's of Science in Engineering Management. Biko worked several years as a software and algorithm development engineer as part of the design team in the development of the 5th generation air-to-air missile system. He also managed the industrialization and manufacturing of missiles. Biko now heads the Aeronautic System Impact Area at the CSIR. He is an advisory board member of the University of Pretoria, Faculty of Engineering, Built Environment and Information Technology, and a member of the Drone Council of South Africa. Mr. Managa, welcome. The platform is yours.
Thank you for the welcome. And I guess the first speaker or the first presenter The first presenter is Mana, and then I'm the last speaker for the day. I happen to be Mangaga. I just added GA there. Yes, I'm from the Aeronautic Systems Impact Area, which is within the Defense and Security cluster of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR. So the CSIR is mandated to do directed and multidisciplinary research and technological innovation, which fosters also in the national interest and industrial and scientific development. We do this by either by ourselves with our own investment or through cooperations and collaborations with either the private or the public and international players in the industry. So this we do in order to contribute to the improvement of the quality of life of the people of the Republic. So my topic of today, I'll be speaking on the stimulating innovation, a particular focus on the reigniting local high-tech design and manufacturing capability. It is a very much of a broad topic to cover, but however, in the next 20 minutes that I have, I'll try by all means to give my view as one who's part of the industry of where I see where we are given the environment that we are operating in and where we should be in the future being the next 10 years in 2030 as aligned with the NDP. So how do we, let me give a bit of a context. Many economies around the world, they have strived to move from being, of their economies to move from being commodity-based and subsistence farming to more of a technological-driven economies and service industry. South Africa has successfully done so. Over the decades, we've managed to have transitioned very well and transformed the economy. So we know very well that from the data in the Stats SA that manufacturing is the fourth largest industry in South Africa, which contributes 14% of the GDP. So it goes to show that this is a sector which is particularly very, very, very important in making sure that it improves our economy and thus improve the lives of the people. So I would want to also touch on the fact that there has been a lot of developments over the last few years in the industry. And then, but the focus that I wanted to bring the audience to is on the sector which the aerospace, aviation, and defense, which has played particularly a key role in bringing the high-tech design and manufacturing capability in South Africa. So where do we see ourselves in the year 2030? We have come this far. We have a good baseline in terms of technology and service, which is technological in nature. But where do we see ourselves going in the future? And then where are we currently? So I will look into some of the factors that contributes to the manufacturing capability. So, but let's look at it this way. The stats that I just gave you, which speak of the industry being the fourth largest in the industry, it actually, in effect, it covers a wide range of other industry like food and beverages, petroleum, chemical products, and so on. But you do not see any of the high-tech design and manufacturing sector featuring in the statistics that I just mentioned, which implies that there has been a downturn somewhere in the industry over the years, which has necessitated to the topic that we can look into reigniting it. You reignite something that has been, whose flame has been extinguished. So in his article, Mugwenyi, he said, no nation in the entire world has developed without having the manufacturing sector contributing more to the GDP than any other sectors. I particularly think this is true because we've seen in the economies of the world where some they've come even to claim number one or number two spot from just roughly over 40 years of time. So, but I want to focus on the aerospace, aviation, and defense sectors, particularly in the high technology manufacturing industry. So if you look into this sector, which can be reflected in the spend as a percentage of the GDP. We see that the countries that has spent a significant amount of their GDP as a percentage of the GDP are countries which had a clear stated vision and a plan, and they decided that they want to go to, in a particular year, to be a technological advanced country that is specializing in the high-tech design and manufacturing, but they used the aerospace and defense as a driver. So this is also true in a country like ours, but many decades ago, roughly 4 decades before, 4 decades BC, 4 decades before Corona. There has been a significant amount of defense spend, which has necessitated, I think it was prior to 2000, it was in the region of 14 to 12% of a GDP, which was spent on defense. And then over the years, we can see that this spend has been rather declining rapidly over so, and to the point where we are sitting now, according to the CIPRI data and also to Status A, we're sitting at 0.7% of the GDP. And it goes to say that it is well known that to sustain a good technological base, high-tech industries, and the defense, a capable defense force, you need to spend at least something in the region of a plus 2% of the GDP. We are not even way close to that. We are at 0.7. So, which can already see from the graph here that this implies that we have had a decline in the industry as a result of the decline in the spend in the defense, particularly in the high-tech defense and manufacturing. But other countries, I want to highlight particularly the countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia. They are spending in the region of plus 25 to 30% of their GDP. And then we all know that their stated goal is to make sure that they transition or they transform their economy from being oil-based to more of services and technological advanced economies that is based on manufacturing of various systems. So by this, we already can see their intent by the amount of spend they make in the defense. And so for us, in relation to us, the dwindling or the decline of the budget spend versus the increased spend in other countries, you can already know what would have happened there. It would have resulted in the brain drain in some of the countries, in the areas of the STEM areas, where people would have migrated to go to areas where they will be able to express their creativity. Engineers and scientists are artists. They are people who love to express their creativity by designing system, cutting-edge technologies, working with things that are futuristic. So we have experienced some of that right here in South Africa. So some of the examples that I can show that we, with a time when we have a very good spend as a percent of the GDP, we've had some good engineering marvels, some good engineering feat. But some of them, they had some difficulties, but I'll highlight those. Look at for instance, one of the examples, the dual car, electric car, which was funded by the DSI a decade or so ago, and then where it was a well good thought out technology, but it has somehow fell through because they, for many reasons, but one of the reasons was in relation to the funding and the focus of the time in terms of where do you want to see the transport economy shaping it into. So we have other examples like the attack helicopter, the Roy Falk, which was funded by the DoD, fully funded, the state-of-the-art aircraft. But we don't see many of the countries, international countries, flying those, even including our own. So something must have happened that has necessitated such failures to commercialize and gain good market access. So some of them are in the port, etc. So there are issues of those that needed to be highlighted so that we can understand exactly what happened. So, but again, there are many other successes which I'm going to highlight quickly, which, for instance, the design and development of the 5th generation air-to-air missile. This has to go to be one of those that highlight that South Africa, at a particular point in time, had the necessary capability to design almost anything. At this point, we are able to design a missile in which it's in a class which only 1 in 5 countries in the world had the ability to even attempt to design such a missile system, and which we're able to design at a fraction of a competitor's cost. We're talking about the region of a 2 billion versus 7 billion rand of a competitor, almost at the same time scales, and then the resources being almost as well 1/3 of the competitors. So you can see that the South Africa had, or let me use the word had, the capability to engage or to execute complex projects with no doubt. So, and some of the examples I'll go into, the likes of the Casper, which is still in production to this day, the G5 and the G6 artillery system, the Seeker UAVs, which are still in operation, which are well touted when they're in the theater of operations. They're still good systems which are being in production at this day, like the Ingwe missile and so on. I think at this point I need to even note that you can see that I'm from a missile background. I now and then put a missile in there because I believe that that's one a technological challenge which only few countries and with their engineers and scientists dare to attempt to produce, because it requires a wide range of capabilities or critical skills in order to package such a small but yet complex system. It is, by the way, also a transport system, since we are in a summit which is sponsored by the Department of Transport. It is a transport system. It does transport a package to a target location of your choice. So we also had many successes in terms of infrastructure, where there has been a wide a number of infrastructures which were built over the time to support the design and development of the aircraft system or rockets or missiles. One in particular is the one that we have here in the CSIR, which has a comprehensive testing capability of wind tunnels, which can test anything from 100 kilometers per hour system, even cars, to also to a amorphous system that travels in the speed of sound, to transonic speeds, and also to supersonic speeds. So almost anything flying to up to the speed of supersonic, we are able to do test and evaluation, and also some experimental work on them. So these are world-class facilities which, even to this day, they still operate. We still are able to accommodate international customers. In fact, there is always a lineup of international customers wanting to do state-of-the-art designs of the next generation aircraft, next generation rockets for space launches and missiles. So these are one of those successes which were developed in the time, because there was a particular focus and adequate investment. And there is also Gerotech for design integrity and endurance testing of vehicles. This is very well used by the automotive industry. We have the wide variety of facilities in the Denel Hotech facility, for instance, the vacuum chambers, the EMC facilities, the clean rooms, which are used for fine mechanics integration of electro-optical systems, and also anechoing chambers for development of low radar cross sections. So we do have all these facilities that are still, some of them obviously they were not necessarily well invested on, and then they almost got mothballed, but others are still pretty much in use. For instance, the OTR, overback test range down in the Cape, and then the TFDC. which is used for aerospace and development, flight test operation, and also used for commercial satellite tracking. There is a huge amount of airspace around these facilities, which can be used for aviation and space exploration or space development and testing of those systems. So we do not have limited facilities in this sector. They are still there. They can be those that are almost modeled can be resuscitated. And then we had the capability to engage in programs such as the A400M, where we manufactured and do the assembly of the Airbus wing to fuselage fairings. And then also within that company, the private company, able to do the manufacturing of the wingtip as well. So those capabilities existed. So what happened? Maybe everybody should know that there are some things that happened over the past few years that has turned the industry almost on a very much steep decline. So, but I'm not going to touch that. I think I'm going to focus much more on the how do we reignite the high-tech sector post the pandemic. So how do we navigate into this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment? How do we do that? So this is one of those things that I'm going to try to cover now in the next few minutes left. So some would say that the government must cherry pick a project for funding that will be a vehicle in order to reignite the high-tech sector. It is a good argument, but the challenge with this approach is that I think the CEO did allude to the fact that the ATNS CEO earlier alluded to the fact that the resources are very limited. The financial resources more so are limited in South Africa. So how do we do that? How do you know which projects will spark or will reignite this high-tech design and manufacturing sector in South Africa? So it will be very difficult to choose. There has been many other sectors that are now springing up very rapidly, which deserves attention to, which resources needs to be allocated to. So the challenge with this approach is that the government pool funds is limited, and then its ability to select the best project is definitely constrained. So the government normally are better at selecting, instead of projects, they're better suited to select sectors. And certainly one of the sectors which I believe that the Department of Science and Innovation has been looking into is the green hydrogen. So which appear to have enormous potential that South Africa is uniquely positioned to benefit from. There's much more of what South Africa can benefit other than other countries in the globe. So I believe that there is a good case to be made for the investment into this sector, because this sector does cut across many other sectors, more especially in the transport sector, be it air mobility or ground mobility. It does affect that. So there are many opportunities which can be necessitated. So, but more broadly, I think the government can facilitate a massive explosion of private sector innovation or creativity and investment in the high tech. They can do so by creating the right enabling environment. We have seen in the recent tax incentives, for research and development that has been very much useful at stimulating the R&D and then necessitated the rapid growth of SA space sector and UAV in the private sector. So this is very important that when you see that now the private sector is able to navigate the sector which was primarily for public through the state-owned entities. So through the advancement of technology, it has become easy, but the funding, in this case, the tax incentives, has come very handy at enabling this kind of successes. So, but unless these incentives are much more broadened to support product system development, meaning that we don't develop up until the technology demonstrator. We don't get funded until the technology demonstrator level. They cannot succeed. So I believe that it needs to be expanded to the product system level, where there is factories built and support into the market access and the commercialization of their product or technologies. So unless that is happened, I believe that will be a downward fail, as we have seen that it's been happening in the past decade, where there are small companies that get funded, and then they don't see past that technology demonstrator level with a product because they can't have the guaranteed market access, and they do not have the capital to buy machinery, to buy to create the whole factory, to support the whole product system. So, like a case in point is the jewel that I've just mentioned earlier in my opening. So we have to make sure that this R&D investment must get to the point where it helps these players to get to the industrialization and commercialization and into the market. We've seen the likes of the LT, which has now become the market leader in the VTOL or UAVs. So they're doing quite very well, and then that's the success through that. And then also the AACC space, they're geared now to produce the CubeSats for the African customers. And then we have the likes of the Sling aircraft, which is a global market leader in a kit-built light aircraft. And then they're expanding, obviously, their product portfolios. And also the champion into the the champions in the gliders is the Jonker sailplanes. That has a wide range of these light gliders. So for RSA to create a high-tech design and manufacturing sector, what does it need to do? I think to start off with, we need to acknowledge our conditions as they are right now. So we are busy currently surviving today's conditions in 2021. We are an industry in decline. I'm particularly referring to aviation, aerospace, and defense in particular. That we are an industry in decline. We have aged skills, and there's not been a good number of intake of younger engineers to come and then get skills transferred into. And then there's been a brain drain, as you've seen demonstrated in the DoD decline budget, which has necessitated most of the number of rocket scientists, engineers to move to the Middle East to explore opportunities where they can express their creativity, their innovativeness. The old infrastructures, these infrastructures were built many decades ago, 4-5 decades BC, and the low investment level, and that's what the condition that we're surviving, and the lost market access. So all these things that you can see, you can clearly see that that means the contribution of the defense, the aerospace, aviation, the defense sector into the economy would have been very little in the past few years. Which means that there is a need to revive them. We've seen other countries that they're picking up, the economy are getting much, much better because they're investing, they're pumping in money and focus into these industries. So for RSA to create a high-tech design and manufacturing sector it's strive for, it must ensure the following. It must ensure that it creates an enabling environment. There also tax incentives for research and development, which gives opportunity for co-investment either by private or international suitors. And also it must have that broadened funding scheme that supports the product system development. And then also that SMEs incubation and protection must be one of the primary focus as well. And then they must be held or trained to operate in regulated sectors. Example, the regulated sectors like the medical industry, the aviation and space, where safety is critical. So, it's not easy to establish a company, a small company, and then or and already by then know exactly the design requirement, the safety design requirements, which safety plays a critical role in this sector. Without safety, none of these flight systems will be in the air, and none of these devices in the medical industry will be put into use to aid in patients, curing patients. So safety is critical and comes at a cost. So safety engineering is a discipline which this sector does embrace a lot, and then we need to make sure that in these incubations we are able to impart that knowledge and into the SMMEs. And the idea of open source designs, which will make sure that they do not have to start from scratch, and they are already designs which they can be made available. There can be a state-funded technology IPR register, which is listed publicly, and in which these SMMEs can access and be able to, they can access this and then be able to solicit the commercialization proposals, so that they know exactly what is already developed, and then they can commercialize further. I think part of our mandate and part of our strategy at the CSR is to make sure that we enable the SMMEs to start up and also commercialize our IP, which is in fact is a public IP, and they can take on and then become successful companies. That is the new strategy of the CSR which we're driving. So there's also has to be better interdepartmental collaboration. That is very important, that the Department of Transport, the Department of Defense, Department of Science and Technology, these are the departments that needs to come, and Department of Education, to work together in making sure that we can capacitate the whole ecosystem and making sure that we have enough or adequate skills and capability in order to reignite this high-tech design and manufacturing sector. So the STEM, the better alignment with academic institution, it is very critical. I'm of a view that we should be by now, I don't know exactly why we're not, we should be introducing things like CAD modeling and 3D printing in high schools, not in universities, but in high schools. It's already there in universities. We should be introducing such things in high school. We should be introducing robotics in high school, coding in high schools, because these are the kind of skills that we want learners to already know. By the time they leave the universities, when they come for internships and so on, they're already well aligned and they know exactly what is expected by the industry. These are this kind of skills that will take us to the future, so that we can create the future. So how far is the gap between 21 and the future that we want? I do not know. But somehow this gap should not be long, because we are already in decline. So the last few slides, just to quickly highlight that the point that I was making in terms of the government creating an enabling environment. But perhaps let me start by saying we are in the survival mode, as you've seen in the previous slide. Survival mode meaning that if nothing happened, the red flags are already up. We may just have the industry collapsing. Some say that the industry has already collapsed. But I'm more optimistic and say that it is rather collapsing unless something happens, unless there is a government intervention in terms of creating the enabling environment so that we can move from this survival state into the competitive industry that we want to be. And thus doing, they need to do so by also increasing the research, development, and innovation funding to incubate the necessary the organization to a level where they become competitive. For instance, in this model, it's a well-known model. To the slide is well known from the technology studies, where the funding, the state funding, stops at the technology development level. If you see here. So this is the reason where I was mentioning that there have been a lot of failures attributed to that fact, where state would have funded this research from the government labs, research institutions, academic institutions to do research and applied research up until the demonstrator. But after the technology demonstrator, there seems to not be a guaranteed suitor who takes on or invests in commercializing, industrializing, and commercializing of these technologies or products to the future. So my proposal, or what the CSR we propose, is to have a look into when the government now focus on extending their intervention or their involvement into the product system development. And at this level, we believe that the SMEs, for instance, would have been protected in the sector in a way that protected against the foreign competitors, because they will be fully funded to the point where they up their productive capacity and technological capacity. They will have matured in terms of the technology readiness level, and their investment also will have been secured by the private funders or the suitors or international. And also that they need to be incubated and supported until they're able to can produce economies of scale and have experience to compete in the open free market. This, I believe, that will necessitate it will help in reigniting this local high-tech design and manufacturing sector. So, and again, another funding model which has widely been used, where the public funds from basic research, applied research, until the tech demo, and then being private sector coming in after the tech demo, or after they've seen the proof of concept, after they've seen what this system or this technology can do. Normally, this is almost very late. That's why they call it the valley of death. It creates a valley of death where most companies or most startups or an organization or their ideas tend to die out right here. Because at this stage, this is where you will have needed to have upped or to have sustained the level of investment in order to project yourself and ensure that there is enough factories, enough machinery, enough done the market research and understand exactly where you're going to place the technology or the product into the market, and also the industrialization portion of it coming in. Most private or international funders, they are very wary of just about any idea funding. They want to make sure that it can ensure success. And usually when the public or the government lingers longer, it gives confidence to the international investors to also invest in this, because they can see that it's a government-backed horse in this race. So I propose that these tax incentives include the investment into the factories and other product systems that actually create the high-tech manufacturing sector, that create the sector in which South Africa is striving for. These tax incentives and funding vehicles for co-investment in the technology development, they can be very revolutionary. Look at how it covers all that gap that exists, where there's tax incentivized private investment. So it is not directly public funding the gap that is existing there. It is rather the private by means of tax being incentivized. And also the government support into the market access to make sure that we are fully covered, and subsequently the private and international can take over after commercialization phase. I believe that this can bridge the valley of death and thus accelerate innovation, and that's minimize the risk of new entrants in the space dying or having a fear of exploring or trying to explore technologies in this area because they're afraid they may fail. So in closing, I think the most important thing to do next would be to capacitate this system. By doing so, it will be to make sure that we look into in this way, that the design, development, qualify, certify, and manufacturing, those phases or the core capabilities that are required in order to ensure a successful design and to the manufacturing of a system, or it's by making sure that we have the core skills that are developed. The core skills in this sector primarily are in the regions of control system, RF engineering, electro-optical engineering, the digital structural software, power electronics, mechanical design, aeronautical engineering, thermal and fluid, analysis, and industrial engineering. So these are some of those core skills that are required. So we must make sure that there is proper mentoring, graduate internship, and as I indicated, that we must go lower and then start to spark interest from high school and to universities, and making sure that these are addressed properly in the curriculum based on where we're projecting ourselves to be in the next 20, 30 years. We must create an interest. So, and also capacitating and revitalizing the facilities, like the testing and operation facilities. We still have a lot of those TFDC, OTR, HOTEC, GEROTEC, CSR, as I mentioned earlier, and also revisit or regaining back the capability which we have lost, which is the maintenance, repair, and overhaul of aircraft. And this is a lucrative market. It is still lucrative, and it still remains lucrative. So I believe that we can still get it back. We need to capacitate that. And also airworthiness and certification, and then research institutions such as the CSIR and also the private sector should come in handy to assist the SAA in drafting even new policies or new regulation that will regulate the new product systems such as the drones, the UAVs, and making sure that then we don't have regulations that hinder the creativity, and then but rather it should be enabling this private and public exploiting design organization to freely be able to design in numbers this system and then put them into various applications. And also, which is critical, something which is critical, which is I think something that which is done very well in the AMSCO environment, DoD AMSCO. It is a system engineering and project management of complex systems. And also square kilometer array, they do it very well. And then we need to enhance that. It is one of those capability or critical skills in which they need to be researched, or I mean, they need to be beefed up because it's still there. And another thing, which was the new the emergent sector, which is the green energy, which cut across all sectors, which DSRI is exploring, the development of the hydrogen fuel cells, where it can be used both in air mobility and ground mobility, as I've indicated. But the important thing here will be to provide also the infrastructure incentive for these developers so that they can know that the most costly part of setting up this whole ecosystem will be is the infrastructure. If there's no infrastructure, some of these ideas, they die out with ease. And then also the development, the industrial development zones, which I believe that they will also aid in reigniting this high-tech environment, will be the development of the aerotropolis, the automotive manufacturing, and the high-tech electronic manufacturing zones. These are the things which are doable. It has been done with a new type of funding model. We can do it and then get South Africa working again. We can get South Africa back in competitive into the high-tech space, both with the collaboration between private and public and also international, because funding has to come from all streams. So we can do this, and then I believe that we are well still suited on that light. So in my closing, imagine if the next Elon Musk did not have decided that he did not have to leave the country to realize his dreams of the next Tesla or SpaceX. Thank you for listening, and then that's where I'll end my talk. If there are any questions, I'm very much willing to be engaging with you right now.
Thank you, Mr. Managa. We really appreciate your thoughts, your expertise, your knowledge. We also appreciate the fact that you are forcing us to look through the telescope lens into the future and be able to plan accordingly. I do have some questions, and one of them is pertaining to your closing remarks with reference to Elon Musk having left South Africa, exactly where you are in Pretoria. And our guests have been so engaging in the chat box. But before we tackle the question, what I took from your presentation as a previous end user of the defense and security innovations that are availed by our government, and also a potential future user who might benefit from the collaboration between defense and also private and public sectors. It's exciting. Planning for the future and strategizing accordingly is highly important. Adopting innovative strategies which aim to support future fit manufacturing innovations is really key. There is no way we cannot have an integrated approach, particularly to sort of navigate outside of the pandemic into an even better future. Innovation indeed does not come cheap. There has to be adequate funding and investment from both a governmental viewpoint and also from a wider industry viewpoint, either public or private. It's highly important that we allocate funds to ensure that South Africa develops into and well prepared for the future. Training and development is also important. We have to ensure that our human resources are well trained, are given critical skills, and also they form part of our strategic thinking for the future through the innovative lens. We must also test the market and make available our innovations to the world. I mean, what an opportunity we missed, particularly with the Rattle and also the Rooivalk. They could have made billions for this country. And if we are optimistic enough that our innovations are of world class, then we should make them available to the world and compete in that space so that South Africa can become an innovative space and one to be reckoned with. We need more places like Overberg, TFDC. We need more places like Gerotech for testing and development. We cannot rely on these places alone to give us what we need for the future, especially if we are planning big. The global pandemic has slowed us down in as far as innovation is concerned, but it has not necessarily closed all the doors for opportunity. We have to be agile as an industry and a sector to take up whatever limited opportunities there are and rebuild for a high-tech, brighter future. Private and public partnership, collaboration, and future innovation will indeed shape the industry and be able to make it future fit. I mean, in my view, maybe South Africa can be a place that develops a solar/electric powered helicopter that could be sold worldwide. We could have that coming right out of our shores, right behind the footsteps of Russia and a limited others that have not necessarily mastered that space. Thank you for your insights. I really took a lot from that. And indeed, if our thinking is channeled in this manner and we follow innovators and leaders like yourself, we will definitely be able to build a better South Africa. I have a couple of questions that have come through the chat box directed at you, sir. Two come from Marcosini, so I'm going to separate them so that we can make it easier to engage with. He asks, would you say the lack of resources, example, monetary support, is the reason for lack of innovation in South Africa, or the belief or lack thereof that South Africans can be innovative to compete on a global scale is a hindrance? So he just wants to understand whether these reasons are why we are not innovative enough as South Africans. Your platform, sir.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I believe South Africans do believe that they can be innovative. I think, as you have seen with some of the examples on the private sector, many of these, they start off very little on their own, and then they build up, and then until to get where they are. So, more especially in the aircraft design of these light aircraft and so on, and also in other sectors. So, but the biggest issue that I think it is the problem is that there is no enabling environment and also the necessary or the adequate funding that enables these innovators to express their creativity. As I indicated, that a sudden downturn, or not even a sudden downturn, a steeper downturn towards the past 3 to 4 years, and also a little bit of a defocus on the sector has seen 300 to 400 of very highly skilled engineers and scientists leave the country to pursue their creativeness in the Middle East. So to show that the Middle East, they've created that environment which these innovators, they know that this which enables them to thrive. But without that in South Africa, we almost like there is no place, or there's no fertile soil for anyone to plant their seed and expect any growth. So that's what I was trying to point to say. We need to address the enabling environment, the enabling environment, and the adequate focus and investment into RDI, research, development, and innovation. When these two things, the confluence of these two things, will necessitate innovation. That's what I believe. I hope I answered that question well.
Thank you, sir. Yes. You did even touch a bit onto the second part of Makosini's question, which was linking to your closing remarks pertaining to Elon Musk, that Elon Musk has left our shores to realize his dreams elsewhere. Similarly, other South Africans migrate, and these are innovative South Africans. They go abroad, and he wanted to know whether is it because their products are more acceptable there than in South Africa? Their innovation is more acceptable there than in South Africa? I think our CEO also alluded to the fact that air traffic controllers are poached by Middle Eastern companies because we really train them well here, and they see themselves working in a better environment in the Middle East. Is it because their skill is only acceptable there and not here in our beautiful nation?
Yeah, no, it's not that the skills are acceptable. The government, the concerted effort made by countries abroad, it is so significant that everybody can see, they know exactly that in year X, this is what they want to establish. So which means that they have already laid out the ground, and then they have now indicated to the people that come and then lay your seed, and then the soil is fertile here, and then it will provide the right infrastructure, will provide the right necessary support for you to grow your ideas. And then that's why they don't hesitate, because that environment is there. So it just so happens that they are doing that, they are creating that environment with the opposite happening locally, or maybe not so focused. So in that way, people who really wants to express themselves, who wants to innovate, and who want to see their ideas out there, they have no choice but to seek opportunities at those particular places. So the ideas, they're great ideas, and they can work very well here in the context of South Africa. It is just only needs those two elements, the confluence of those two variables, the enabling environment and the investment. That's all that I believe it is needed in order to bridge that gap.
Indeed, sir. And then we can, as a nation, be able to retain the skill set and also ensure that those who possess the skill can make the country thrive. Konzu Musa asks in the chat box whether, actually, he says the South African defense sector has a plethora of intellectual properties that could benefit civil aviation and also revive the defense sector itself. How do we promote military-civil partnership for technological transfer and development?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I will speak more from the CSR point of view. The CSR is mandated to do exactly that. The IP, which is developed through the CSR and or which is state-funded as IP, is one of the points that I made, that it should be made publicly available. It is there, and it is for the public, and for the public to access it or to exploit it. They don't have to pay for it because that's public. So they can already exploit that IP. But the CSR is the one that is mandated and suited at supporting that kind of IP exploitation. So we necessitated by making sure that we make it available. We find that private or that private partner that we can commercialize any of this IP with and support them. Either it becomes a spin-off company or whatever, they already have the company that we commercialize, we help and assist in commercializing of that IP in that environment. So yes, the DoD developed IP. I think there was a book written many decades ago called Swords to Plowshares, which meant having to, I did my master's on that, which commercialization of defense-related IP into the commercial space or the private space, which then there are ways in which these technologies can be done, can be commercialized into the private sectors. Many countries are doing that, and they've done so for many years. The US, the UK. They've done so successfully. That's why their startups they easily come and then they pick up very well. So there is no reason why we cannot attempt at doing that here. So yes, maybe in other institutions like the DNLs or so, you can't necessarily easily access the IP because most of it is also secret. But in the CSR, it's much more suited to look into some of those IP which can be commercialized into that space. Swords to Plowshares, that's what the CSR, more especially in the defense and security cluster, what we are focusing on.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from an anonymous guest. And it says, civil aviation is migrating towards space-based technologies. What is the defense industry's plans for space-based technologies? Maybe you might know this. Maybe I may know, but I may not be suited to speak on behalf of the likes of DNL or SANZA. But all I know is that there already are private entities that are starting to play into that space. But I think the collaboration between the state-owned entities or companies and the private sector is crucial in making sure that they exploit that market very well, the space. It is going to be big, and it is already big, but I think South Africa has to pay much attention into space. So I believe that it is the way to go. Thank you, sir. And finally, I think this one you touched on, and it also came out in your bio that you play a role as well in the education sector, particularly the higher education sector. Anna asks, given the current state of our education system, sadly exacerbated by the COVID pandemic as well, how do you see us accelerating the adoption of things like robotics, etc., at high school level?
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question, because one of my suggestions is to make sure that we get into that space. So I think this has to be part of the curriculum. I believe that some of the private schools already have that, but unfortunately, it is not reaching the broader society. So I believe that introduction of such courses, and it's not really a very complex thing or difficult a field in which learners cannot learn. Learners at that age, from grade 8 and so on, they're already well versed in terms of the use of technology and so on. So I think if it's introduced into the high schools in the curriculum, there's subjects that are focused on doing robotics and coding, CAD, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, and so on, where they can play around with these things and then see how they work and so on. And then it can also stimulate their creativity and knowing that they can make things happen already at that age, knowing that you don't have to wait until you finish university in order to see how integration of certain components coming together, they can make something happen. The world is already moving towards that, where there's going to be a whole lot of robotics, a whole lot of artificial intelligence or machine intelligence. So coding is also going to be one of the most basic thing for any learner to do. So I think the education, the higher education, or even the basic education should come in and very close to industry, or rather industry should strive to get as close as possible to the Department of Higher Education and Learning, in order to ensure that we indicate the need for such skills. Because if they, on that level, they do not know exactly what are the skills of the future, they'll continue to develop skills of the third industrial or second industrial revolution, which may have been obsolete already and not needed. Whereas we need something that is far much more advanced and easy to attain. Already, learners, they can easily access. They have access. Most of the learners, they have access to the internet. Internet has a plethora of data or of example or coding exercise or coding website, which they can already by themselves start doing these things at home. So they don't necessarily have to depend on waiting for somebody or the school to introduce such subjects. They can already do that by themselves. But the idea is that as a broader society, we have to play a role together in encouraging the need and the focus into this. So that's what I was also referring when I said the government creating an enabling environment. I'm not necessarily saying it for the industry. I'm saying it in the complete ecosystem. The ecosystem include education, and include the society as the stakeholder. So it cannot be seen as just that it's a focus on industry. So it is encompassing, because we're talking about something that has a potential, or that has shown to have a potential of contributing to the country's economy by far, creating jobs or creating opportunities for companies to express or contribute into the economy. So overall, all these things integrated, looking at all of them in what we call the system of systems, the whole ecosystem, is very important to make sure that we do not address one element of the part of the whole. So one part of the whole, we have to address all parts at various levels, of course. But industry, higher education, and the government has to come close together. We need to be at the table, at the same table always, with the development goal. But the goal has to be there, has to be clear, and then government must drive creation of that enabling environment. Industry will play its role. Institution, education, academic institution will also play their role.
Mr. Managa, thank you, sir. I think as well, small business development can play a huge role in getting us back to where we are supposed to be, or where we want to see ourselves in the future. And those skills can already be transferred and given to our kids our brothers and sisters in primary school and high school already, for us to prepare for that future of a thriving small and medium enterprise environment as a key role player in the economy. I'd like to thank you so much for engaging in this manner. I'd like to thank you so much as well for your patriotism. The ideas you share, you can hear they come from a South African base, and also the need for or hope that our country can indeed in the future become better. I'm going to invite you to a discussion panel, but that after our break. I do have one more question from Yoshli Naidu, which we are going to sort of kickstart our panel discussion with. I think it fits in that kind of scope. Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it is towards 10 minutes after 3. It is an opportune time for us to take a body break. The Innovation Summit has taken innovative steps to provide for you coffee and tea outside, and also some finger snacks, but that can only be provided in a period of 10 minutes. So can we be back here at 3:20 to join the discussion panel and also to engage in these critical topics after our refreshment break? Thank you so much. Thank you. Done. Yeah, this guy is very engaging.
Yeah, no engaging.
Yeah.
Also the topic here, okay.
Guys, you're not muted. You're not muted.
Sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, and our presenters, hope we are all back. Thank you for engaging with such enthusiasm in our previous engagements pertaining to the presentations by our guest speakers. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you back from the tea break. I hope you enjoyed the refreshments, and I also you were also able to grab a few snacks. I'd like to invite on the panel, and maybe we can switch our cameras on, Mr. Mana, Mr. Managa, and Mr. Nzenze, for a continued panel discussion around cybersecurity, data management, building a data lake for ANSP data management and analytics, and also stimulation and innovation, reigniting local high-tech design and manufacturing capabilities. While I wait for Mr. Managa to come on, and I see that he's on, I am going to then take this opportunity to pose this first question to Mr. Mana. Mr. Mana, one of the trading questions that we left for the panel discussion around cybersecurity was what are the current trends of state-sponsored cyber threats in aviation, and how are air navigation service providers identifying such currently, both in Europe and maybe in Africa, if you may know?
So that's a good question and a very difficult one for two reasons. In fact, one of the prime we have today is we are quite blind in the way that to understand that you're under a cyber attack, most of the time you need to have some detection means. Just to help people to realize the average time between a cyber attack is successful and the time we realize that this cyber attack was successful is around 200 days. 200 days. Some are immediate because you have a ransomware, so a pop-up window saying, please pay so many Bitcoins. But quite often it takes a while. I take a concrete example. We had a cyber attack at Eurocontrol, beginning of April. And after investigation, we found that the guys were in the system already before 2021, already in 2020, more than 4 months. Why? Because the guy used a legitimate mean to enter our system. They were able to steal some credentials, some means to enter the system, and they used these means. So it was very difficult to understand because they somehow didn't modify data, they didn't do something wrong, they were looking for some information. So just this example to concretely show you that it's very difficult to realize that a cyber attack is ongoing. And when we speak about state-sponsored groups, they are quite often even more stealth. So they are probably there sometimes to know where are the vulnerabilities, or maybe to inject certain dormant malware that will be activated later once they know that they need to do something. You see what I mean? So that's why it's super difficult. If I take aviation systems, most of them today, they don't generate what we call log files. The operating system, yes. The firewall, yes. But the aviation-specific application don't generate that. So it's difficult to know that something is happening when you don't have the means to detect that something strange, abnormal is happening. So very difficult to answer this question, very difficult. But clearly, aviation being a critical infrastructure is a way for states to put some pressure on other states, clearly.
Thanks, Mr. Mana. To follow up on that, and maybe just to ask Pihelo to drop his display. On a follow-up, I mean, just for people who might not necessarily be aware of some of these aviation-related cyber threats. Can you perhaps give us an example of what those are, and maybe how prevalent they are in global ANSPs? I read yesterday about the recent one. We are all going into or migrating to ADSB, and already there is potential threat in there, given how the system works. Are there other examples, perhaps?
So yes, definitely. I give the example of the GNSS, so the radio frequency interference. Clearly, there are some, I would say, some means to, I would say, enter the system, but not via the aviation-specific systems, because it could be maybe more complicated. It could be easier to enter via what we call the corporate IT, and then move laterally to other aspects, to other systems. And that's usually, I would say, probably an easier way for the groups. Why? Because they have already this product to enter corporate IT. If they need to go to what is specific to aviation, then it's an additional investment. So think about it for the guys who are interested in making money. They always go to the easiest route. So they optimize their product, the use of their product, to as much as possible make money out of it. The groups which will probably be interested in what we call more the aviation-specific standards protocol like ADSB, these are more state-sponsored groups. It's there to put pressure on other states. That's why I showed you what's happening in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea. Well, you can guess easily why. That's why there you have things which are probably a bit more aviation specific. If you take this part, there it's tens, hundreds of cyber attacks per day on aviation systems.
Thank you, sir. Let me bring in Nokwanda from an aviation perspective, aviation engineering perspective as well, into the conversation to address some of the questions of interest in the engineering and data management space. Nokwanda?
Thank you, Komoto. The next question is actually directed to Mr. Managa. It is from Anonymous. It says, in your opinion, do you think that there's an appetite for government, academia, and private companies to jointly rescue the declining manufacturing sector, considering this is a basic sector for ensuring the nation's economic sustainability? Or the plans and ideas are there, is the implementation thereof that is lacking? So is the question clear, Mr. Managa?
Sorry about that, I was muted. Thank you for the question. It's rather a very interesting question.
Sir?
Okay, can you hear me? All right. Yeah, it is rather a very interesting question because it started off by mentioning.
You are still on mute.
All right.
We can hear him. We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you, Mr. Managa. You can go ahead. Okay,
right. Thank you. So it is rather an interesting question because it started off by mentioning the appetite between the private industry and the education sector and the industry to stimulate or to address the declining industry. So in my opinion, I think there probably is a bit of no collaboration. Individual companies are trying by all means to address those challenges. And then remember, we are operating in the environment where these companies are in the survival mode. Most of them, I'm not saying all, they are in the survival mode where they're trying to stay afloat. So to address the declining industry in totality, it's a very complex system. The industry itself is a complex, you look at it, it's a complex system that you cannot isolate one one particular area and think that's where the problem lies, but it is the whole entire system in which it requires a more high-level focus, more also in the government. Government is able to do that, is able to have a clear view of the whole system and be able to create that enabling environment. But each individual company is very difficult because how do you, as one individual company within the industry, go out of your way and try to get 100 more companies, small and big, to address this issue in the context of a declining environment where it is very difficult. You all about trying to survive and securing yourself for the next 5 years or so. So in my opinion, I think there is not that collaboration, and then rightfully so, I think because it's supposed to be high above.
Thank you, Mr. Manafa. You have addressed the questions well. The next question that we'll then ask you is, what are some of the risks of a heavy reliance on international manufacturers or exposure to the systems that we did not manufacture ourselves? So if any risk exists, should we not take reasonable steps to ensure that we put mitigation plans in place against these risks?
Okay, yeah, that's another very important question. The foreign suppliers, they're obviously a threat in some areas where local manufacturers could have provided such solutions. For instance, if larger organizations, their first priority is to go and then purchase a system or a product which you will find that there's a local company that can produce, it put the local company out of the market. So the only or the much needed access or market in which they need to serve is taken right away from them. So which then make it difficult for them to survive. That is one of the reasons why I was mentioning that they need to be protected. Local companies need to be protected by ensuring that at least they have that base market where they can supply their products to. They can design, develop, and then they can supply them to a larger organization, particularly the state-owned entities. I think state-owned companies should be the biggest market for SMMEs in this country in the high-tech environment, to at least secure them at least a market and get them to a level where the economy of scales can enable them to then compete in the international market. So yes, they are a threat. There is a need. We have to address that by making sure that we limit the over-reliance on the foreign supply of goods that can be manufactured here.
I couldn't have agreed more. Myself, Mr. Manaka. Then the next questions, I will then ask my honored colleague to address the next questions. Over to you, Homoso.
Thank you, Nokonda. I think we can bring in Mr. Nzenze into the conversation, asking this critical question. And based on the role knowledge management is playing in modern industry and organizations across industry, but maybe we can narrow the conversation to just air traffic management. And ask what role is knowledge management currently playing in the air traffic management space, and how we can, as an industry, enhance air traffic management during these times of COVID-19 and also post the pandemic.
You're muted. We can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think the activities that have been happening within the organization, especially those that were being driven by knowledge management, were actually the evidence on what can be done to ensure that we, as the organization, we thrive in these times. And I mean, the couple of things that we would have looked at are things, for instance, like your brown bag sessions. And I mean, those are the things that you would actually use to ensure that you fast track the human creativity, which is one of the things, I mean, that cannot be taken by the things like your data analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And also, those were also the platforms which actually drove the collaboration between the people, so that you can ensure that those things that cannot be automated can be done using the technologies and all that. And then one of the things that we actually did, in fact, was to use the technology to facilitate the better collaboration, and also drive the essence of the effective collaboration between more valuable and valued things that are happening within the organization. And secondly, it's around using those knowledge management sessions to ensure that you actually break down any technology roadblocks or any what I call the information disparity, because those are the things that you'll find that at the end of the day, they end up hindering the efficiency of building an effective and capacitated organization. So for me, those things where, for instance, you'll have the things like your SME lessons learned and your master classes and all that. Those are the things that you can be able to use to ensure that you drive the collaboration in the organization. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Nzenze. I think, you touch on some very important aspects pertaining especially to innovation and also collaboration as well. Now, number one, how do we then create a culture of knowledge sharing to enhance air traffic management? And I'm going to put it simply, how do we then ensure that there's collaboration between yourself in your own expertise space, and also Mr. Managa and also Mr. Mana from a cybersecurity viewpoint? Thank you.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a couple of things, for instance, that we've actually tried to do as the organization, which was something between planning and standards. But it's just that there were a couple of hindrances that we had to hit with this, because there were no proper governances that were in place that were governing all these things. And one of the things, for instance, that we were looking at was to say, how do we then build the permissions model for the ATNS? And as we started to engage on that, some of the things, for instance, that we would look at was to say, okay, you have to look at on how do we then forecast the aircraft that are being bought by the customers of ATNS. And also to see, for instance, what kind of flights now are you getting? Are you getting the narrow body or the wide body? And what is it that, for instance, that you can use now when you go, for instance, to the economic regulator to negotiate for the tariffs? What can you use as a stake to say, for instance, rather than to say, I'm going to continue charging the wide body aircraft this standard fee? What is it that you can be able to get, for instance, from the narrow body? Because those are the crafts that are now flying. And those are the kind of projects, I mean, that would allow you to be able to test and to share the knowledge amongst the organizations and to collaborate with as many units within the organizations as possible. And also, one of the things that you, for instance, look at is that how do you then use what you have in terms of the data and the analytics to ensure that you test these strategies so that you can fail as quick as possible with minimal cost? Because the challenge is that you don't want to fail at a stage where you've actually spent a lot of money in the project. You want to fail as quickly as possible, which is what is being suggested by Agile. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. And I mean, it's not a small project that you can wake up and do as the analytics, or you do as the planning. It is something that requires, for instance, the collaboration between planning, IT, and the strategy department.
Mr. Mana, do you have a take on that? How can we best collaborate to enhance knowledge sharing across all the sectors?
I think there are two aspects for me which are important. First one is that you have a certain, I would say, policy decision which is made at high level, at decision makers level. Why? Because otherwise you won't have the resources, you won't have the budget, you won't have the legal means to actually share information. And it's really important. Don't underestimate the need to have some kind of agreement with others to work together. The bad guys, they don't need that, They team up or they steal each other information. They don't need a formal agreement. But we are in a world where, and that's sometimes a pain, to be fair with you, where sometimes we need this kind of agreement. So that's why it's important to have really from the top of your organization a support. So it means that you have a policy, that you have a strategy, which is based on risk, because also don't think that you will be able to address all the threats. So you need to prioritize those which are important, critical, and maybe accept to do nothing for those which have low risk. So it's important for me really to see that from this point of view. It's nice to have, I would say, bilateral initiatives, but at one stage you need to formalize things. You need to have a policy, strategy, risk-based approach and management in your organization so that you engage with the entities which are important to your organization. You see, resources are scarce, even more with the COVID crisis. And when I say resource, both human and money. So you need really to go to the essential.
Thank you, sir. Nokwanda, you can come in.
Very interesting conversations and discussions indeed. But however, we are pressed for time. I wish it was a normal event where we're in a room, because we could have continued. This type of platform will cut us at 4. So unfortunately, we have to stop our discussions. I would still have loved to hear your valued inputs from the learned colleagues from different aviation sector, in the different aviation industries. It was a joy to actually host you. It was a pleasure, an honor to actually host you in this Avi Afrique Summit. I myself will not go out of this room being the same. I've gotten so much insight in terms of aviation in general, because when you work, sometimes you work in your own silos way, but when you engage like this and you find different inputs from different industries, from different people, you actually learn a lot. So I would have loved that we continued with the summit for today. However, we'll have to cut it here for today. I'll then hand over to my colleague to then close. Komoto, over to you.
Thank you, Nokwanda. I think well put. In the main frame, I think we've heard how from across industry and all corners of aviation and aerospace, defense, from a security and risk viewpoint, we can come together and collaborate to make this a better industry, particularly now more than ever, when we need to come out strong beyond the grips of the pandemic. It shouldn't matter whether we can collaborate across continents or from within one continent, but I think it's best that we are able to share knowledge and develop and move as one, so that the industry could be a better one post the pandemic. innovation is at the center of everything that we have to do for this sector. Number one, for the purpose of safety, most importantly, for the purpose of efficiency, and also ensuring that we save our customers a whole lot of money. But most importantly, for the sustenance of the industry, so that those who are coming before or after us can take over from us and take this beautiful industry forward. The preservation of IDS centers like the CSIR, the preservation of global air navigation service provider players like Eurocontrol and air traffic navigation services here in South Africa is very important and critical for the growth of industry, and also for the future as well, in order to adequately serve and satisfy the needs of our future customers. Gentlemen, from all of you, I've really taken a lot of knowledge and wisdom. I hope our guests have also taken from your cup of knowledge in the way that I did. The most important thing right now is for us to continue staying in touch. By all means possible, I'll find ways to stay in touch with you. I do believe that it's important, and you sharing your contact details to the rest of the industry is indicative of the spirit of collaboration and also of teamwork. Thank you so much for everything that you shared with us today, and to our guests who've been patient and engaging at the same time. I'd like to thank you for today and how you've been able to stimulate innovative thought, and also to bring into the topics some of the areas and corners that were not even covered or ever initially conceived. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite you again tomorrow as we take up day 2 of the summit and discussions around innovation and taking this industry forward in an innovative manner. From me and the team, please have a wonderful evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.